All right, what is up, my lizards? We're back today with
lizard,
a Preservation Evoker guide for Season 2 of the War Within, specifically when it comes to arenas and PvP. We're going to start off this guide by going over our specialization. We're going to talk about our hero talent tree. We're going to go over stat priority, gearing, gems, enchants, all that good stuff. Then we're going to go over our healing spells and the general healing rotation, and then do the same thing with damage. After that, we're going to go over the utility of Preservation Evokers in arenas. We're going to go over our talent build and like what we can kind of switch around for different situations. We're going to talk about how to use our trinket in arena. We'll go over some of the good and bad comps. We'll go over macros. And then finally, we'll go over some of the resources you can use to help improve your gameplay as a Preservation Evoker. I'm going to do my best to keep this a little bit shorter. I have a tendency to yap, so we're going to try to do a little bit better. But if you find this guide helpful, make sure you like the video and subscribe. If you have any constructive criticism, you can leave it down in the comments. I would love to hear what you like or what you don't like about the guide and what you think I could improve on. With that out of the way, let's get started. I do have a full written guide that I'll leave down in the description, so if you prefer to view it that way or just want something to easily reference back to, I would encourage you to visit that document and maybe save it. And with that out of the way, let's get started. Now, for your default talents, this is the build I would suggest. We're going to go over this in a lot more detail as we go throughout the video, but there will be an import code for this down in the description, and that's also in my guide as well. First up, I want to talk about what's new in patch 11.2. So if you're returning to Dragon, these are the things that have changed since the last time you've played it. We have a new talent called Unshakable, and it increases the effectiveness of your empowered spells by 10%, and you cannot be knocked back when you're casting empower spells. So this is really cool because there's a lot of classes that maybe if they didn't have a kick up, they have several other options to kick you, so it works on like Ring of Peace on monks. I would assume it works on the Windwalker monks punch up, but I'm not positive on that one. I know it works on like Thunderstorm and Blastblade for mages. So it's a really cool talent. It just increases your throughput and prevents you from getting knocked back. Tempo Charge is one of our new capstones. Temporal Compression increases the damage or healing of your next empower spell by 5% per stack. You can stack Temporal Compression up to 4 times. Each time you cast a bronze spell, it causes your next empower spell to reach its maximum level in 10% less time. So it's a stacking buff. Basically, it makes your empowered spells cast faster, up to 40% faster. This is saying that if you have it stacked, 4 times, then your empowered spell is going to be doing 20%, more damage or healing. This is important to keep in mind when you're casting like Fire Breath, because you can get a lot more damage out of it. And then also you can get more healing out of Spirit Bloom, and you don't generally charge up Dream Breath, but we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Just in Time is a talent that has been redesigned. That's this talent right here. It gives you 2 charges of time dilation and reduces its cooldown by 10 seconds. This is huge, especially for a newer Preservation Evoker. This is going to make the spec a little bit more noob friendly, just to have an extra external to put on your teammates. You do have to kind of remember that time dilation does not actually reduce any damage, it just delays it, so you still have to heal through it, but it is a very good external cooldown. Delay Harm is the other one that you could pick in this tree. I would probably not suggest this very often, but basically it makes it so that your time dilation actually has a damage reduction portion of it. So 15% of the delayed damage from time dilation is absorbed. So this is, I could see some situations where this would be really good. When I think about it, I think maybe solo shuffle, because once you get like 2 minutes in dampening, and that's one of the biggest things evokers struggle with as far as healing anyways, is you just can't, your throughput is very affected by dampening because we don't have any like immunities or actual damage reduction, and this actually puts a damage reduction into time dilation. Reversion now just automatically has 2 charges. It used to be a talent, so that's pretty cool. And then Nullifying Shroud has been redesigned to where when you cast Verdant Embrace, you are preventing the next full loss of control effect against you for 4 seconds. So you use Verdant Embrace, you're immune to CC for 4 seconds, or at least the next CC that's used on you in that amount of time. It's a very cool change, but it is going to take some getting used to, but it also allows that Nullifying Shroud to be used into a lot of specs that would maybe purge it or steal it. So it's a very, very cool change, and this is probably going to be one of the biggest changes to our class as far as how we play in arenas. We are going to lose the current season's tier set, which would heal our teammates if they fell below 40%. For a good amount of damage. We're losing the cooldown reduction on Verdant Embrace, which makes Nullifying Shroud a little bit less valuable with this new talent. But overall, I don't think it's going to change our playstyle too much. Next up, I want to talk about Chrono Warden. This is going to be our main hero talent. We don't really ever use Flame Shaper. What this is going to do, it's going to change your Living Flame into Chrono Flames, which is going to duplicate some of the healing and damage that you do with it. It's going to turn your hover into a blink effect instead of a just a move forward effect, so you can avoid CC with it. It's also going to give your hover a slight damage reduction for 3 seconds after you use it. So that's pretty cool. It's going to cause your teammates to do a little bit extra damage and healing whenever you cast Tip the Scales. Tip the Scales is also going to give you a 30% haste buff that decays over 30 seconds. This is huge, especially when we talk about our tier set. You'll see why here in just a minute. It's going to give our Spirit Bloom an additional 30% hot over 8 seconds. So it buffs our Spirit Bloom. It's also going to make our Spirit Bloom give us 3% haste up to 9% if you charge it up to the 3rd level. So pretty much always you're going to want to charge it up to 3. It's going to basically, this reads kind of funny, but basically what this talent does is just reduce the cooldown on all your empowered spells by 6 seconds. So, Fire Breath, Spirit Bloom, Dream Breath, all on it have 6% or 6-second cooldown reduction. Has a chance just to make your echoes do more healing. It's going to cause your non-defensive abilities with a 45-second or longer cooldown grant 5% intellect. I don't ever think about this one, consciously, but basically that's like your Oppressing Roar, your Time Spiral, Tip the Scales. They're all going to give you 5% intellect. And then last but not least is After Image, and this is something you want to think about. Empowered spells send up to 3 Chrono Flames to your targets. So you always want to be charging your Fire Breath and Spirit Bloom to the maximum charge if you can, or at least to 3 charges, because it'll send out additional Chrono Flames that will either heal your teammates if you're using Spirit Bloom or do additional damage to enemies if you're using Fire Breath. That being said, it doesn't send multiple Chrono Flames to the same target. So if you use Fire Breath and you charge it to 3 charges, but you only hit 1 target, it's only going to send out 1 Chrono Flame. If you want it to truly send out 3 Chrono Flames, you have to hit at least 3 targets. Same thing with Spirit Bloom, but that's not really an issue. If you're playing 3s and you use Spirit Bloom, it's going to hit all 3 of your teammates as long as you're in range. What makes Preservation Evoker kind of unique is that we have a shorter range. We have 30-yard range on most of our abilities, and it also puts us in kind of a weird situation where we're constantly making ourselves a little bit vulnerable because we're going to be closer to the fight, and especially with Verdant Embrace, whenever you use that on the target, it's going to bring you over to the target. So that's just kind of something that you have to work on as a Preservation Evoker, is your positioning. Luckily, we have a lot of damage that we can provide and a lot of disruption to the enemy team. And with this new Nullifying Shroud talent, anytime we do Verdant in, we're going to have that, mini CC immunity to maybe reposition or, get CC out, something to disrupt an enemy from CCing them. As far as stat priority going into Season 2, we're going to be basically using the same stat priority we've been using all expansion. We want to start off by getting a good amount of haste. I would suggest getting somewhere between 20 and 25% haste. Probably looking closer to 25% since stats are going to be increasing this season. After you have that, you can pretty much just stack Mastery. You want versatility on basically all of your gear. There are some evokers who play with less versatility, but Preservation Evokers are actually pretty susceptible to getting killed in like a stun and stuff like that. So I would suggest getting to 25% versatility and haste, and then you can just stack the rest in Mastery. As far as gear, for our tier set, we are going to be looking to get the shoulders, chest, gloves, and legs. Our 2 set is going to reduce the cooldown of Tip the Scales by 20 seconds. Tier set bonuses are only 33% effective in PvP, so we're going to get only a 20-second reduction in Tip the Scales cooldown. But as we said earlier, like Tip the Scales has a ton of benefits because of our hero talent tree, and so being able to use that more often is going to be huge. The biggest thing is just the haste off rip. Like, we're going to get 30% haste up, 20 seconds faster every game. Our 4 set is basically just going to cause our temporal burst to cause Chrono Flames to strike additional targets. I don't know exactly what these values are going to be in PvP because they're reduced by 66%. And I don't know exactly how that comes into play when you're talking about 2 additional targets. I would assume the repeat 15% of additional damage is going to be reduced to 5%. And then that, that damage or healing up to a maximum of whatever amount, that's going to be reduced by 66%, I would assume. But basically, it just equates to your Chrono Flames doing additional damage and healing. So I do think it will be worth having 4 set. As far as embellishments, I can't see any reason we wouldn't be running the same embellishments, which is going to be the energy redistribution beacons. I usually craft these on either my rings or my neck because that's a good way to get a large amount of haste or mastery, whatever you're looking for. We're going to have this new cloak, the Reshi wraps. These are going to be upgraded every week. You get this cloak initially by doing the intro to Koresh quest line. And after that, basically any activity you do on a weekly basis will give you the currency that you need to upgrade the cloak. If you go out here to Koresh, you'll come to this little island and there'll be an NPC here that you'll talk to upgrade your cloak. But this will be the best in slot item, even for PvP. So yes, you do have to go get the Reshi wraps, and yes, you will have to go upgrade it every week, but you get it even from PvP activities. So doing your skirmishes, doing your solo shuffles, doing your arenas, you'll upgrade this just automatically each week. That being said, you will get some items from a vendor that to slot into your cloak called fibers. The ones that you get from the vendor are going to be blue, but you can go to the crafting table and craft the epic versions of these fibers. So like right here, I've got the pure dexterous fiber that gives me versatility. It is 100% worth it to craft the epic versions of these fibers. And the cool thing about them is they do not get destroyed when you swap them out. So I can take out that one I just had in and put in my haste version of it, and I still have my versatility fiber in my bags. So I would go ahead and craft probably the versatility, haste, and mastery ones and just keep them in your bags at all times and swap them out as you need them, because it'll just depend on your stat distribution, which one you want in your cloak. I would like to shout out Murloc.io here. That's Murloc with a K. Is a good place to go when you're gearing up throughout the season to see what some of the top evokers are. I couldn't tell you, the exact best order to get each conquest item and each bloody token and what to craft and all that. But basically how I would suggest is at the start of the season, you're going to start off with honor gear. If you want to farm the bloody tokens, great. I wouldn't spend any bloody tokens on slots that will be tier, just because you'll want those to be max eye level if you can. If you can hit 1600 in arena or, rated solo shuffle, rated battlegrounds, that will give you a token to turn any piece into a tier. So that's something you want to go for pretty quickly. You'll get a quest at some point to craft that'll give you the heraldries of conquest or whatever it's called, that allow you to craft however many items depending on which slots you go in. I would suggest doing your neck and 2 rings. That'll get you 3 pieces off the bat as soon as you get the quest to craft those items. And then really from there, it's just getting your conquest pieces on a weekly basis. Yeah, for gems, we're going to want to get the Cognitive Bloodstone again. This is the one that gives you precog if someone misses a kick on you. One of the cool things about Preservation Evoker is you don't really have to worry too much about getting kicked. I mean, it's not like a non-existent, but if you do happen to get kicked, you usually have a lot of other options because we have so many schools. We have green, we have red, we've got bronze. I think Chrono Flames counts as something different too. But all that to say, we have plenty of schools of magic, so you can pretty much always be casting something, even if you are kicked. That being said, it's still worth it to get precog because of Obsidian Metal, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, will keep you from getting interrupted. So while you have it up, a lot of times people will kick into you, and so you just get the benefit of having precog and not being able to be CC'd. As far as the other gems to use, it's going to be based entirely on what stats you have. So again, we're looking for 25% haste, 25% versatility, and then the rest in mastery. Basically, just use the other gems as you can to get your stats in the correct place. The 4 you want to look for is Versatile Emerald and Masterful Emerald. That's going to give you haste and versatility, or haste and mastery if you're past where you need versatility. And then the Versatile Onyx and Quick Onyx. That's going to give you mastery and verse for the first one and mastery and haste for the second one. For enchants on your cloak, you're going to want Chant of Burrowing Rapidity, it's going to give you movement speed. On your chest, you're going to want Council's Intellect. That's going to give you extra int. A wrist, you're going to want Devotion of Speed, which is just movement speed. On your legs, you're going to want Daybreak Spell Thread for 177 intellect and 5% mana. The mana actually is pretty important because that's one of Preservation Evoker's biggest weaknesses is mana. For your feet, you're going to want Scout's March. That's going to give you movement speed. And then for rings, I would usually suggest Curse Mastery. The reason I like Cursed Mastery the most is because crit is like truly a stat we don't need at all. So Curse Mastery, what it does is it reduces your critical strike and gives you more haste than just the regular haste enchant. But you could also just put on haste enchants or mastery enchants if you prefer one of those stats, or even versatility if you feel like you need more burst. For your weapon, I would suggest Authority of Fiery Resolve. This is basically just going to give your healing spells a chance to do additional healing. Some other options, though, are Storm Rider's Fury and Stonebound Artistry. I believe they both have a chance to proc either haste or mastery, but the most often used one is going to be Authority of Fiery Resolve. All right, that's out of the way. Let's talk about how to heal as Preservation Evoker. Evokers all use our resource of Essence. Essence is used by us to cast certain spells. We have 2 spells that use this resource. The first one is going to be Echo. This is going to duplicate your next beneficial spell that you cast on the target that you cast Echo on. All right, so Echo is going to cost 2 Essence, and it's going to duplicate the next beneficial spell that you cast onto the target that you echo. So if I echo, my mage here, but then I use a beneficial spell on the hunter, it's going to echo the reversion that I just cast on the mage. So just keep that in mind. Basically, you want to use echo before every healing cast, as long as you have the essence to do so. Our other essence ability is going to be Disintegrate, which is a damaging ability, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. I'm going to go over our healing spells briefly and talk about which talents kind of affect them. The first one is going to be Reversion. Reversion is going to heal 15% of the damage taken over the last 5 seconds and then put a hot on them. One thing about this hot is you want to keep this on your main healing target because of this talent right here, Grace Period. Your healing is going to be increased by 10% on targets with your Reversion. And then another thing you want to keep in mind is this talent right here, Life Spark. Reversion healing has a chance to cause your next living flame to cast instantly and deal 50% increased healing or damage, and it stacks up to 2 times. So the reason you want to keep that in mind is because even the hot that gets placed on people has a chance to proc these Life Spark procs. And so that just made my Living Flame, or Chrono Flame in this case, instant cast, and it's very good burst healing. It's also very good burst damage. So you want to be keeping Echo Reversion on your main healing target. And I also like to suggest keeping it up on a second target as well, because you're proccing more Life Sparks. And as long as you're using those on cooldown, your Living Flame will also be causing essence bursts through your instant Living Flames. Whether you're using them as damage or healing will be causing more essence bursts, which makes your next essence ability free, which is your Echo or Disintegrate. So it's kind of just like a loop of like, I want to keep Echo Reversion up on my main target so that I get instant cast Chrono Flames, which will in turn give me more Echoes to use. That way you can just keep both your healing and damage rolling, and you're getting like basically a constant loop of procs that give you instant cast heals. Also, Reversion is one of our best burst healing. So if you're using an Echo Reversion on one target, that's 30% of the damage they've taken over the last 5 seconds. And if they're taking massive burst damage, you're going to see huge heals from using Reversion. Next up, we've got Verdant Embrace. Verdant Embrace by itself is not that powerful, but when you use Verdant Embrace, you're going to put Lifebind on the target. And if I echo one target and then I Verdant Embrace a second target, it's going to put Lifebind on both targets and yourself. What Lifebind does is it basically duplicates the healing that you do on any of the targets with Lifebind to the other targets with Lifebind for 40%. So this is kind of how Preservation Evokers deal with AoE damage. If I can echo one target, Lifebind the other target, and then cast like an Echo and Spirit Bloom, that's going to heal all 3 targets and then duplicate the healing on the other targets. So just, you need to be making sure that you're making good use of Verdant Embrace to get those Lifebinds up. That being said, because of our PvP talent, Nullifying Shroud. You do have to keep in mind that Nullifying Shroud or that Verdant Embrace is basically your way to get a CC immunity. So you don't want to be just using it willy-nilly when you're at risk of getting CC'd. You may want to hold on to it to avoid a CC and then still continue to do the rest of your healing rotation. It's kind of weird because it's like it is good to use for AoE healing, but it's also very good to avoid CC. So it's going to be kind of a balancing act of how to use it in that. You do have to kind of keep in mind that Verdant Embrace is going to take you to your target. So you need to keep in mind your positioning and kind of have a plan of what you're going to do right after you Verdant Embrace. I feel like I'm often, if I'm getting into the middle of the map by using a Verdant Embrace, then maybe I'm hovering out right away, that kind of thing. Another thing that Verdant Embrace does is put the Call of Ysera buff up on yourself. It's going to increase the healing of your next Dream Breath by 40% or your next Living Flame by 100%. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Talk about these other spells. Spirit Bloom is going to be like one of the first Empower spells that we kind of talk about. Basically, the longer you cast Spirit Bloom, the more healing it's going, or not the more healing it's going to do, but the more targets it's going to hit. It's not going to do more healing to each target. The longer you charge it, it's just going to hit more targets. That being said, as often as you possibly can, you want to get it up to 3 charges. And I should mention that 3 charges is once you get into this bar right here. It is not once you get here. This first bar doesn't count, because if you release Spirit Bloom right there, I mean, I guess it's going to charge to the start of the first, but that doesn't count as one of your charges. The reason you want to charge it to 3, though, is 1, you get 9% haste if you fully charge it, but then also after image. For each target that your Spirit Bloom hits, it's going to also send a Chrono Flame to them, so you're going to get that additional healing, which is huge. And then obviously you're going to get the heal over time, and we take this talent to reduce its cooldown by 10 seconds. It's also getting reduced by 6 seconds here, so the cooldown on this is like kind of insane. It's like 16 seconds as of right now. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but basically you want to use Echo anytime before you cast healing spells. That's the same thing for Spirit Bloom. Try to get Echo up on your main target before you cast your Spirit Bloom. And if you are taking the talent Font of Magic, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but it's going to increase the maximum level of your spells by 1. If you do happen to take this talent, you don't want to charge your Spirit Bloom to 4 unless maybe you're playing with like a hunter and you're trying to heal its pet. There's no reason to charge it to 4. 3 is where you get the maximum value out of it when you're playing 3v3 arenas. Dream Breath is going to be another Empower spell. This one is going to do, it has like a little bit of upfront healing, and then it does a hot. The longer you charge it, the more upfront healing it's going to do, and the less of a hot you're going to put on your target. The quicker you release it, the bigger the hot is going to be, and the less upfront healing it's going to be. Dream Breath, even though you do get the same effect from after image, you're still only going to almost always only charge it to 1, because what you're looking for with Dream Breath is going to be the hot to kind of get you through moments where you're getting CC'd or you get, interrupted or whatever. It's our only like real maintenance hot. That being said, whenever you use Dream Breath, you want to make sure you have this Call of Ysera buff up. So before you are going to put up Dream Breath, I would just go ahead and, Echo one target and Verdant Embrace the other. That'll get Lifebind up, and then you can echo like a couple targets, right? So if I echo 2 targets and then I Dream Breath, I'm getting double Dream Breath on both targets because I have the Call of Ysera. The hot is going to do even more healing, and it's doubled up. It's going to last a long time. I would say it's very, very important to remember to get Call of Ysera up before you use Dream Breath, because if you don't, that's like a massive healing reduction. So yeah, make sure you have Call of Ysera up. I would often, if you're taking like AoE damage, I would try to make sure that you get 2 echoes out before you use Dream Breath. Get it on multiple people, and then just keep in mind that Dream Breath will also always apply 1 stack to yourself. Chrono Flame and Living Flame is our last healing spell. You don't really ever want to hard cast it, but if you're keeping Echo Reversion up on 1 target or 2 targets, you're going to constantly be getting these instant cast Chrono Flame procs. So there it goes right there. So I have an instant cast. You can Echo Chrono Flame, and then you get 2 Chrono Flames that go to that guy. You do need to remember that Chrono Flames will use up a Call of Ysera buff, which can be a good thing and a bad thing. Like if you have Dream Breath coming up in 5 seconds and you just Verdant Embraced, You may have to decide between waiting a few seconds using an instant cast Chrono Flame as a healing, or whether or not you want it to go on Dream Breath. It's not really something you have to think about too much until you get a little bit deeper into the weeds, specifically Call of Ysera, but just kind of keep that in mind. You won't ever just sit there and hard cast Chrono Flames as healing. You're doing something wrong if you're needing to just sit there and cast, 4 Chrono Flames in a row. You may have to use it every once in a while when you're just out of options, but I would say that just generally speaking, if you're hard casting Chrono Flames for healing, you're probably doing something wrong. So just for a brief recap on our healing rotation, we're going to want to keep Echo Reversion up on one target, Echo Reversion up on a second target if you can. To kind of just deal with spread damage, you're going to want to Echo one of your teammates and Verdant Embrace the other teammate to get the Lifebind buff up. We'll want to Echo and Dream Breath the main target to keep a maintenance hot up. A lot of times I will try to Echo 2 targets to get Dream Breath up. And then your big heal is going to be Echo and a 3 charge Spirit Bloom, trying to make sure that you get to the 3rd charge whenever you can. And it's really just rotating through those. You use Echo Reversion for burst healing. You will get super Essence starved if you're just using them over and over and over. But make sure that you're throwing in instant cast living Chrono Flames, either as damage or healing, to get those Essence bursts to make your Echo free, just to keep your healing rotation rolling. For healing cooldowns, we're going to start by going over Stasis. This is probably like the biggest cooldown we have. In the talent tree, we can now choose between Stasis and Temporal Artificer. We'll talk about rewinding here in a minute, but I would say if you really are serious about getting good at Evoker, you just need to learn Stasis. There might be some unique situations for this talent, but more often than not, you're going to want Stasis, and I'll explain why. Stasis, what happens is when you use Stasis, it records the next 3 healing spells that you use, and then when you release Stasis, it casts those 3 healing spells in quick succession. And there's a macro, a stasis release macro, that will allow you to release your stasis whether or not you're in CC. So it's like an insane healing defensive, or whatever you want to call it, healing cooldown that you can use at any time. There's going to be the most common stasis combination that I would suggest is going to be Stasis, and then you're going to Verdant Embrace someone, Echo, and then a 3 charge Spirit Bloom. The reason I like this is you get Lifebind up on you and your target, and then you Echo, and then you're hitting a 3 charge Spirit Bloom on your Echo target, and it's getting spread via Lifebind. So right before I use that, I'm probably echoing a target and then hitting Stasis, Verdant Embrace one character, Echo, and then Spirit Bloom. And then when you're ready to release it, you hit that Stasis release macro, and it just recasts all those spells on all your targets. There are a couple different combos you can use, and some other Preservation Evokers would even swear by them, but I genuinely think that Verdant Embrace, Echo, Spirit Bloom is the best combo you can possibly use in Stasis, because there is no line of sight requirement, and I don't even think there's like a range requirement to the released Stasis. I could be wrong, but it's definitely a longer range than just the regular spells have. The problem with putting something like Dream Breath in your Stasis is if you're stuck in a CC, like maybe a polymorph, like if you're in a polymorph, you're like constantly turning, or like maybe you're getting sleptwalked, towards another evoker. If you release that Stasis and you Dream Breath over here, it's not hitting your team. So I really don't like putting Dream Breath in Stasis. And most often you're going to want to look to put Verdant, Echo, Spirit Bloom to your Stasis. Our next healing cooldown is going to be Emerald Communion. This one's going to restore 20% of your health and 2% of your mana every 0.8 seconds for 4.2 seconds. And then if you overheal yourself, it's going to spread to your allies. That part is very, very, very important to remember, because Emerald Communion does not start healing your teammates until you're at full health and it's overhealing you. That being said, if you Echo one target and Verdant Embrace another, you're all life binded, then you're spreading the healing, because any healing that's going to you is being duplicated to them. It's going to heal you up faster, and then it's going to start spreading that healing much more quickly. That being said, sometimes you don't have a choice but to hit Emerald Communion when you're stuck in CC. It can be used in basically all CC except for Cyclone, Diamond Ice, and Imprison from Demon Hunters. There may be one more that I'm forgetting, but those are the ones I can think of. It's a very good healing defensive because you can basically avoid having to use your trinket for it. I would say in dampener games, like games where you think you might lose on mana, this would probably be the first healing cooldown that you want to use, so that you can maybe get it up a second or even third time later in the game. But you do also have to keep in mind that it does require line of sight. So if your teammates are running around and you're in comms, you need to let them know, like, I'm communing, stay in my line, or else you're not getting healing. Rewind is going to be our big AoE heal. It's going to rewind 33% of the damage taken, and it's actually, I think, 66% of the damage taken in the last 5 seconds by all allies within 40 yards. So this has a longer range than the rest of our abilities. It's 40 yards. It does not require line of sight, and it's going to be best used after very spiky damage. So rewind does absolutely nothing if you're just getting rotted down, and like, let's say you've gone from 50% health to 10% health over the last 20 seconds and you hit rewind. It's not going to do the healing as if you went from 100 to 20 in 2 seconds. You do not want to use rewind unless you've just taken big spiky damage, and that's kind of how you want to use it. Like I said, it does not require you to be in line, so it's very good for like against rogue smoke bombs or mage ice walls, like that kind of thing. It can be good for those situations. With all of our spells that heal damage that was taken over the past however many seconds, none of that calculates correctly when you're in Cyclone. So you need to keep that in mind as well. So like if you come out of a 5-second Cyclone and your teammates, even if they've taken super spiky damage, if you hit rewind, it's going to do the minimum amount of healing, which is like 143,000 according to this tooltip. It's going to do absolutely nothing. So just keep in mind that when you're in Cyclone, it does not calculate the last 5 seconds correctly. So if your team's taking bursty damage and you get put in a Cyclone, you need to either decide to trinket that early or be ready to use a different option when you come out of that Cyclone. Rescue is our 1 minute cooldown, and this is probably our biggest, like, it doesn't really seem like it, but it's kind of one of our biggest healing defensives. I'm targeting my friendly teammate. I'm going to hit the rescue macro. It's going to let me choose somewhere, and I'm going to go grab my teammate and take them to the reticle. This is really good, especially like when you're facing casters. I mean, melee too, because I only need to be in line of sight of my teammate, but I can bring them out of line of sight of anybody that we're facing. So I can take Captain Garrick here and take her around the corner over here, and now I'm out of line of sight of enemies that were over here. It's also giving a 30% absorption shield because of the Twin Guardian talent. Rescue also breaks roots, so if you're stuck in like Boomkin's root beam, you can still use rescue and get out of it. It's a very good ability because it's not affected by silence. So against like Frosty Caves or Shadow Priests, this is going to be kind of your saving grace when you get blanket silence, or even if you just get kicked and you don't have really any other options. Rescue is kind of a beast. It's a very good cooldown, and you should kind of be aiming to use it before you use like Rewind or Emerald Communion, except for in specific cases of dampening games, that kind of thing. You also kind of need to think about rescue as a good way to keep your team offensive. So like, let's say you're playing a melee cleave and your melees are getting kited, especially if they get rooted. It can be a great way to break them out and keep them on their target. There's plenty of the time where I use rescue as a way to keep my team offensive, although more often than not, you probably wanting to be defensive with it. All right. So yeah, that kind of goes over our healing. We went over our general healing rotation and our healing cooldowns. Now I want to go over our damage rotation. All right, for damage, we have, I want to say like 3 main damaging abilities. We've got Fire Breath, Chrono Flame, and then Disintegrate. We also have a couple other abilities that do some damage. We've got Deep Breath and Azure Strike. Just for our general damage rotation, we want to be using Fire Breath on cooldown. Again, because of our after image talent, we want to be charging up Fire Breath to 3 if we're going to hit more than one target, and actually just in general because it's more burst damage. But if I hit 3 targets, I'm going to send out 3 Chrono Flames that do additional damage. So as often as you can, you want to be hitting 3 targets with Fire Breath. A lot of time you'll be using Scouring Flame as one of your PvP talents. We'll go into a little bit more detail on this later, but this is going to purge enemies of magical effects based on how high you charge your Fire Breath. So that's another reason you would want to charge Fire Breath high. Next up, we've got our Chrono Flames, which are going to do Honestly, the most amount of damage of our damaging abilities, or at least, you know, not as much as Fire Breath, probably. But it does more damage than Disintegrate upon testing here recently, especially when you take into account that Scarlet Adaptation stores 20% of your healing and adds it to your next Chrono Flame. And then also we've got Life Spark, which makes it do more healing or damage as well. So basically, anytime you get a free Living Flame, it's going to be doing more damage. And then if you're casting, you know, the instant cast Living Flame in between healing teammates, you're going to be doing even more damage. So that did, you know, 1.45 million plus the extra that it did there, where Disintegrate's going to hit for like 1 million over its 4 seconds or something like that, maybe 1,200. But yeah, you want to be using those instant cast Chrono Flames on offense basically every time they come up, unless you absolutely need it for healing. That's going to be truly the mark of a good Preservation Evoker, is how often you can weave that damage. I don't really want to talk about Deep Breath as damage, but it does do a good amount of damage, especially if you have people grouped up. And then with this talent down here, the Terror of the Skies, which you're going to be running quite often, you're going to also stun everybody you fly over. So you can see it does a good amount of damage, stuns everybody. That's also some damage. And then we have Azure Strike, which is kind of just a good way to keep people in CC, maybe slow them to help your target, help your teammates stay on target if they're not able to get to them to slow. It is important to remember that Disintegrate also slows them. So Disintegrate's probably the better option if you have Essence Burst, but that's the only time you would want to use Disintegrate is with Essence Burst. Especially in threes, we're going to be taking Energy Loop quite a bit. It's going to increase the damage that Disintegrate does by 35%, but what's more important about that is it restores mana. So even though Chrono Flames technically does more damage, you do want to get Disintegrates in as often as you can whenever you have Essence Burst up. It's not really worth hitting Disintegrate for the full cost without Essence Burst, because it costs so much essence, and those are going to be better used on echoes. But if your team is healthy and you have an Essence Burst, definitely weave in those Disintegrates as often as possible. So just general rotation, you want to keep Fire Breath on cooldown. You want to charge it up to 3, especially if you're going to hit more than one target. You want to weave in these instant cast Living Flames as often as possible. And if your team is just healthy and you have nothing else to do, you can hard cast Chrono Flames. And then whenever you get an Essence Burst while your team is healthy and you're not needing to use your Essence on healing, send in some Disintegrates. And that's basically that. So now I kind of want to go over the utility of Preservation Evoker. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but Tip the Scales is going to be something that you want to use early on in the game and then basically use it on cooldown because of how much it benefits yourself and your team. Anytime you use Tip the Scales, you're going to get basically a Bloodlust that decays over 30 seconds. Your teammates are going to do additional damage and healing. I mean, that's really it. But when you use Tip the Scales, it's going to make your next Empower spell cast at its maximum charge. So for Fire Breath, if we're playing like this Font of Magic talent right here, you know, for Fire Breath, that's going to be, you're going to have 4 charges of Fire Breath instead of just the 3. And when you're playing the Scouring Flame talent, that means you're getting an additional one magic effect per level. So you're dispelling 4 magical effects on every target that you hit. So if you hit 3 targets, then you are doing a lot of damage. You're purging 4 magical effects. You're also sending Chrono Flames on each of those targets. So it's just kind of a huge amount of burst, plus you're getting the haste afterward to send more damage or healing. Yeah, you basically, all that to say, you want to be sending Tip the Scales as often as possible. If you're able to use it offensively on Fire Breath, that's what I like to do most. But alternatively, you know, especially like in solo shuffle, I find myself a lot of times in the middle of the game needing to hit a Tip the Scales Spirit Bloom, which is just going to, you know, do a full cast of Spirit Bloom, hit all your targets, and then get you the haste to keep you going. You wouldn't ever really want to use Tip the Scales on Dream Breath because Dream Breath just doesn't do a lot of burst healing if you use it that way. But in a tight situation where both your Fire Breath and your Spirit Bloom are on cooldown, and you just absolutely need the healing, you could Tip the Scales Dream Breath and just, you know, still remember that after image works. So if you hit, you know, yourself and your 2 teammates and you tip Fire Breath, whatever, or Dream Breath, you'll send Chrono Flames to all your targets too. Sleepwalk is going to be our main form of casted CC. It used to be a PvP talent that removed the cooldown off of it and made it, but now we just get that for free. You want to be casting Sleepwalk, and unless you have like a specific go with your comp, I would say you pretty much always just want to keep the enemies on sleep DR. So just as important as damage is keeping one target CC, whether that's an off DPS or the healer. Get into the habit of casting Sleepwalk whenever you have the opportunity. I wouldn't DR people to the third DR, but do a 1 6-second sleep into a 3-second sleep. You've taken that person out of the game for 9 seconds. It's huge. Another good thing about Sleepwalk is you can kind of use it to bait picks, maybe so that your teammates can get off their spells. All that to say, I would just get into the habit of using Sleepwalk as often as possible. Pressing Roar is one of our utility abilities that will basically let out a roar and a cone in front of you, and anyone affected by it will have increased CC duration. So if I use Pressing Roar on this PvP training W over here, and I cast a Sleepwalk on him, it would be 8 seconds in arena. It doesn't go all the way to 10, but it would be an 8-second Sleepwalk instead of 6 seconds. And if I follow it up, the second Sleepwalk, instead of being 3 seconds, would be 4 seconds. One of the things you kind of want to get into the habit of with a Pressing Roar is using it on an already CC target, especially when you're going for it on the healer. I would say when I first started playing Preservation Evoker and using a Pressing Roar, I would come out the gates, go to the enemy team, use a Pressing Roar while everyone's like free, and that gives the healer the ability to, dispel a Pressing Roar. It can be dispelled, line the CC, stop the CC, that kind of thing. If you're using a Pressing Roar on like a target that's already stunned, and then you use Sleepwalk, then you're gonna have a lot higher chance of getting the CC off, or maybe you sleep the target and then a Pressing Roar, and then your teammate can follow it up. It's a much better and effective way to use a Pressing Roar. One of the most fun things to do is a Pressing Roar, multiple targets, and then deep breath over them to get that huge stun on all of them. You do not want to do long deep breaths, because that's effectively CCing yourself for the duration of that flight. If I did it from here to there, I'm going to be out of commission for 4 seconds, where if I hovered up on the target and then did a small deep breath to the shortest distance, I'm going to get them stunned, I'm going to do the damage, and then I'm going to have like 3 additional globals while they're still stunned. Whereas here, it's going to take me forever to get to them. They're going to have time to move out of the way, and then I'm not casting any other spells during that deep breath. Yeah, when you deep breath, you want to do short deep breaths, not long deep breaths. Look how long this is. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's like 4 globals probably where you could have been casting, and I wasn't. Quell is going to be our ranged kick. It's got a 40-second cooldown, and it interrupts them for 4 seconds. As a Preservation Evoker, you're going to be spending a lot of time in CC, even with the nullifying shroud changes. So I would suggest not being so stingy with it, on just using it on like casted CC, and kind of just using it maybe even to stop just general spell casting, whether it's the enemy healer or casting DPS. Like you stop a Shadow Priest from casting for 4 seconds. That can be huge, especially when you're first getting into Preservation Evoker. Just kick something is what I would say, and then as you get better at arenas, you'll learn what's more valuable to kick and stuff like that. An important thing to remember is that while you're in Emerald Communion, you can still kick. You can still use Quell. So a lot of times, like maybe against Druids, you'll Emerald Communion and they're going to go to like Cyclone you, or maybe a Priest is going to go to Mind Control you, because that's a good way to shut down Emerald Communion. You can still kick those abilities while you're in Emerald Communion. Naturalize is going to be our Dispel. If you're getting into a healer just for the first time, dispelling your teammates is just as important as healing them, especially when you're dealing with like melee. Keeping them out of roots, keeping them out of slows, getting rid of CC fast is all very important stuff. Make sure you're using your Naturalize as often as you can, as often as you can when there is something that is worth dispelling. A Cauterizing Flame is kind of like Naturalize, except it removes bleed, poison, curse, and diseases. There's several abilities you're going to be wanting to look out for as far as Cauterizing Flame. Death Mark from, I think it's Assassination Rogues, is one of the big abilities. You remove that and you're removing a lot of damage from the rogue. You got Warrior's Thunderous Roar. You got Feral Bleeds whenever they go into their like Feral Frenzy. You can use it to remove Hex. I feel like not a lot of healers have Hex dispels, so that's pretty good. Also, what's the Warlock spell? Havoc. Havoc is a curse, and dispelling that will stop the Warlock from just cleaving down your entire team. Very good to use. We've got Tail Swipe and Wing Buffet. These are both basically just used as additional kicks. Wing Buffet knocks people in front of you, and then a Tail Swipe knocks them up. I would basically just kind of think about those as an additional interrupt, although you can use Wing Buffet, knock people off of Z-axis arenas, so it's good to keep that in mind as well. We've got Hover. Obviously, you can use it to kite. You get that damage reduction. It's a blink. It's also going to make you move 30% faster, and you can cast spells while you have this hover buff up. So I can hover, and I can cast spells like Chrono Flames. You can't cast in powered spells, but you can cast Sleepwalks. You can cast Chrono Flames. I don't even know if we have any other casted spells now that I'm looking at it. But that would be the main thing. When you're trying to get some CC, it can be really hard to get over here and get CC, but if you hover in, you can cast it and chase somebody down to get the Sleepwalk, as opposed to just sitting there trying to get it and then lining back and forth. When you are playing against melee DPS, you're going to want to take Unburdened Flight. This will make it so while you have that hover buff, it makes you immune to damage reduction effects. I would say that throughout the past season, I've kind of realized that this is a must-take when you're facing any melee, kind of regardless of what it is. And then we've also got Landslide to deal with melee. This will just root everyone in its path. This is one of those spells where it puts out like a line. I have it on a cursor macro, so I'll just hit the button and it'll cast it at my cursor. But anybody caught in that landslide is going to get rooted. It's not only good for stopping melee, rooting them to keep them off, either you or their target, but it's also really good to use against like BM hunters, stop their pets, demo locks, even like Death Knights a little bit. We've talked about a lot of these PvP talents as we've gone through this guide, but I'm going to go over them a little bit more in detail. A Chrono Loop is one that I would just not suggest even using. I haven't ever seen Preservation Evokers use. You can read through it and try it out if you'd like to. Obsidian Metal is basically a default pick, and it's going to give you immunity to interrupt, silence, and pushback effects when you have your Obsidian scales up. This is like so good, especially when you need to get critical spells off, when you're trying to get asleep, when you're trying to heal your team, especially against things like, Assassination Rogues who can just blanket silence constantly, against things like Frost DKs and Shadow Priests who can blanket silence. There's a ton of different ways to use it. I will say I almost always use Obsidian Scales and the opener when I'm trying to get my initial stasis set up, because if you get that initial stasis interrupted while you're trying to cast maybe your Spirit Bloom, that can really lose you any tempo that you had in the game. So you kind of have to learn how to use Obsidian Scales correctly to with the Aura Mastery, but it's a very easy pick to take. Next, we've got Scouring Flame. We used to take this all the time, but I think it will be something we take less often, because I don't know how often we're going to go into Font of Power. That being said, where are all my talents here? When you're facing a Druid or a Mage, I would try to spec into Font of Magic and then take Scouring Flame. The reason being, with Mages, you're going to be trying to get off their altar time. That can be game winning if you're able to purge altar time, and then Druids just being able to dispel their hots is huge as well. And we'll have tip the scales up more often, so we'll have an instant cast, forecast, 4 power charged Fire Breath. So 4 Purges can be really good against those two classes. But it's honestly virtually good against almost every class. Like Priest, you can get off Fortitude, and PIs. Resto Shaman, I think you can dispel Earth Shields if I'm not mistaken. Might be wrong about that, but even if not that, there's a lot of hots that they put out. There's several abilities, but the only ones I would really take Font of Magic for is going to be Major Druid, because you're really trying to look to, like I said, make sure you get that altar time off or get all of the Druid hots off. Otherwise, even if you're taking Scouring Flame, I probably wouldn't spec into Font. Dream Projection is one I haven't used in a while, but basically what this is going to do is it's going to shoot out an astral projection of yourself, and then when you cancel it, or if you get interrupted, it's going to kind of explode. It's going to put a hot on everybody, and it's going to dispel everybody of all their magic effects. So this can be really good to get off. You can basically treat it as another dispel, and it's an AoE dispel. So this could be good again to use against like maybe Shadow Priests or Elemental Shamans to get off their flame shocks. You wouldn't, if you really wanted to be like cheeky with it, you could use it to dispel like even Warlocks, but you have to remember Unstable Affliction does a ton of damage. So, but in past seasons, I have like maybe popped Renewing Blaze and Obsidian Scales, and then used Dream Projection to mass dispel my entire team. You know, because I have Obsidian Metal, I'm avoiding the silence, getting a hot on me, and then Renewing Blaze is also healing me up. I don't think we talked about Renewing Blaze, but Renewing Blaze is something you want to use when you're at high life, when there's going to be a bunch of burst damage in, because it's going to heal you of 100% of the damage that you take over 8 seconds. All that to say, though, Dream Projection is not one that I would suggest. Aside from using it to dispel, like, you know, dots, you can also use it to preemptively to dispel like a polymorph. So say you have a polymorph coming in, you don't have the ability to Verdant Embrace, you don't have a kick up, you could hit a Dream Projection, and then as soon as you get polyed, it's going to cancel the spell, and it's going to hit you, and it's going to instantly dispel the poly, which is good because then it actually uses the DR, where like something like Verdant Embrace and Nullifying Shroud, you wouldn't actually get the DR from getting polyed, it would just cancel, it would make it so the poly doesn't go on you. We talked about Bird and Flight just a second ago. This is a very good talent when you're going up against melee who might be training you. It just gives you the ability to kite a lot better. Swoop Up is another one of those abilities that I don't really ever see people use, but you could try to use it in specific setup comps where you either try to, you know, bring the healer away or maybe grip somebody in for a go. Time Stop is probably one of the highest skill cap PvP talents we have, and it's one of the best. If you can get good at Time Stop, it will actually make you insane. So when you read Time Stop, it freezes an ally's time stream for 5 seconds. While frozen, they are invulnerable. So it's basically a bubble, but they can't do anything while they're in it. This is really good to stop damage, like really big burst damage on one target. So if you can predict a go and you see them setting it up and they get the stun and you stop the damage before they can start getting it off, that can be huge. But more often than not, you're going to be using Time Stop on yourself to avoid CC. If you're tracking your diminishing returns and you know you're about to get kidneyed by a rogue for 5 seconds and use Time Stop right as they use kidney, and you get to avoid the kidney and then come right back out, that is like one of the biggest skill plays you can make. And then like for any casted CC, you know, you've got your Interrupt, you've got Verdant Embrace, but say both of those are down, you can use Time Stop to avoid that casted CC. And then you can come right back out and continue healing. That's realistically how you're going to use Time Stop more often than not. Although, you know, you see a warrior spear your teammate, and you know that's when they're going to be doing all their damage. You can just hit Time Stop, completely nullifying that damage, and that can be pretty good too. Divide and Conquer is going to make it to where your Deep Breath will have line of sight curtains on either side of it. This is really only used with specific comps, but if you can keep like a healer out here and then you're doing a go on a person and you keep their healer line of sight, that's just as good as CC. So that's kind of the situation where you want to use that when you're playing a specific comp that can take advantage of that. It's not one that I would suggest unless you're needing it for your comp. Dreamwalker's Embrace tethers you to an ally, and that tether that's in the middle of it will do damage to any enemies that are in between you, and it also gives you and your ally a movement speed increase. This does not stack with Hover, so it's honestly kind of useless for the Evoker, but it can be good for your teammate if they're having trouble either connecting or kiting away. It does do a decent amount of damage, and it does it heals you for some of the damage that's done as well. Probably not one I would really suggest very often, but when I do like using it, it's usually when I'm playing something like Ret Warrior myself, and then we're facing another melee cleave and everybody's just there in the middle. I like using it because, you know, it gives maybe my Ret and Warrior the ability to keep up or move away if they need to. And then because everyone's just clustered together, it actually gets a lot of value from the damage. As far as the default builds, I would say always take Nullifying, pretty much always take Metal, and then I will usually take Scouring or Unburdened. That being said, Time Stop is, if you want to get really good at Preservation Evoker, taking Time Stop pretty much always and getting good at using it is probably a better bet as well. Now I want to talk about the optional talents in our talent trees and how we kind of move things around. This is what I would probably call the default talent build. Over here under the class tree, you're going to switch between Inherent Resistance and Instinctive Arcana. You're going to play this talent when you're not facing casters. You're going to play this talent when you are facing casters. If there's like one caster and one melee, I will generally play 2 stacks of Instinctive Arcana, except for when it's like an Ellie Shaman, a Dev Evoker, or a Destruction Lock, just because they're burst magic damage is so high that I would still like to have this 8% damage reduction. Down here, Time Spiral and Spatial Paradox is, I kind of choose between these two. Time Spiral will give yourself an additional hover that you can use in the next 10 seconds, and it'll also give your teammates an additional movement. One of their movement abilities will come off cooldown for the next 10 seconds. And let's say it's already off cooldown, it'll give them a charge that they can use in the next 10 seconds for free without putting their original one on cooldown. So this is really good, especially when you have teammates, I would say specifically melee, that need to connect to their target. It's good to use for that. Spatial Paradox increases the range of all your abilities, I believe doubly. It allows you to cast while moving, so it's kind of gives you the hover effect, but then it also increases the range of most of your spells by 100%. The way I use this ability is if you Spatial Paradox, it affects Oppressing Roar. So when you're facing rogues, they can be across the map. You can hit Spatial Paradox and then Oppressing Roar from across the map, and you're hitting such a large area that you're very likely to get the rogue out. And not only that, but Oppressing Roar actually puts them in combat. You can use Landslide in an opener to get rogues out, but it doesn't put them in combat by rooting them until you actually do like a damaging ability to them. So I like using Spatial Paradox, Oppressing Roar in rogue matchups, although Time Spiral is still probably more valuable even in those matchups. But I really just like to make rogues sad. So that's what I would say there. If you don't like having an active ability here, you could come out of these and go into like Fire Within for a Renewing Blaze cooldown, or you could look at some of these other talents in your talent tree. Innate Magic, I used to think overall was pretty good. There's probably some unique scenarios where you could use it. Yeah, I would probably just suggest either Fire Within or Innate Magic if you're just wanting like a good passive ability to use. Over here in the specialization tree, basically everything's locked in except for this ability here and then Energy Loop down here. In threes, I would say Energy Loop is almost always necessary just because of the mana regen. But if you're in solo shuffle or you are in threes that just aren't going the distance, you can potentially move this out of here. You could use it to get Just in Time. You could use it to get Fauna Magic. Some other Preservation Evokers might suggest some of these 4 talents right here. I used to love Spark of Insight, but I think if you get used to using Spark of Insight and how it works, I think it makes you worse. I think it makes you less efficient, because I think you shouldn't be needing Essence Burst from Spark of Insight if you're playing the class effectively. Life Giver's Flame can be effective against, zoo classes like BM Hunter, Demo Warlock, Frosty K's, but I've never found that it did enough healing for me to spec into it. Titan's Gift is good, just passive healing, so you could move out of Energy Loop. The Titan's Gift, if you're not having issues with mana, but you are having issues with keeping up with healing, this is just a decent passive talent. And then up here, if you're wanting Fauna Magic, you can move one out of Flow State into Fauna Magic. If you want the extra time dilation, which I think is better for especially newer Preservation Evokers, I think this is a really good cooldown. And not even newer, I think a lot of Preservations will like this talent build. There is just one Preservation Evoker I talked to that was like, I don't even think we need it. I think it's just nice to have 2 in Flow State. I would say this is probably the default talent build. So yeah, that's really all I move around over here, because everything else is just so good, basically where it's at, or is necessary to get to something that's good, Yeah, so that's really it for the talents we can move around. For trinket usage, I just want to go over this kind of briefly. There's 3 ways I would use my trinket, so it's only 2. So when you trinket for your follow-up, you have 2 main options. The first one's going to be rescue. So if you can trinket, rescue someone out of line of sight, that's going to give you plenty of time to heal them up. The other option is going to be trinket rewind. If your team is taking massive AoE damage, like you all just went 100 to 50 in 2 seconds, that is the perfect time to hit trinket and rewind. Other than that, there's not like huge... I guess now with Verdant Embrace, Trinket, Verdant Embrace could be potentially good too. You're going to get Lifebind up on you and the target, giving you more time to heal. But if you're playing Nullifying Shroud, you're also going to be immune to the next CC. And a lot of times when you Trinket, people are going to be looking to CC you right out of it. So if you can Trinket, hit that Verdant really quick, get that CC immunity, that may give you just enough time to recover before you maybe go into a follow-up CC. Do not Trinket and hit Emerald Communion. That's like one of the worst things you can do. You basically want to think of your Emerald Communion as an alternative to Trinket. Obviously, there might be some scenarios where you have to, but you don't want to do that as often as possible. As far as good comps, there's a lot of good comps. I think the most well-renowned, best Preservation Evoker comp is going to be Rogue Boomy. That can be with either sub or Asa. I haven't ever actually like played it at a high level, but there's not a single high-level Preservation Evoker that you can talk to that will not recommend that comp. Basically, Rogue, any other class is good for Prez. The reason being the Rogue can lock things down so you can actually play the game, be more offensive. Rogue Devastation Evoker is another really good one. But yeah, you know, insert X DPS here with a Rogue and you're probably doing good. Melee cleaves like Ret Warrior, Turbo, TSG, which is, you know, Warrior DK. Those can all be good beginner Evoker comps, I feel like, just because you're kind of in there with your DPS doing damage with them. And there's a lot of synergy of, you know, you stunning and doing massive cleave damage while your melee are in there. Double dragon comps, I really like running with Devastation Evokers and another class. It actually works really well with several different comps. So double dragon, you could do DH, Warrior, DK, Hunter, Dev Hunter's insane. Dev Shadow Priest is insane. It's actually like, it's one of my favorites personally. I don't know that it would be considered the best of the best, but it's double dragon is insane and it's ethical. LEDH is really good. LE Monk is good. And then Cupid is good. And there's probably several others that other evokers could on. As far as classes that I don't like playing with, I'm going to have to say Warlocks and Mages. If you're good at Preservation, like if you're really good at Preservation Evoker and you're playing with really good Warlocks and Mages who know how to play around your weaknesses, 100% you can make it work. So please don't just like don't say, you know, no to every Warlock and Mage you've ever seen and say that you're a Preservation Evoker so it won't work. You know, give it a try. But as far as I'm concerned, like the toolkits kind of don't match up. Mages are going to kind of be going all over the map, you know, kiting their targets, and you've got a short range. You only have so much mobility to keep up with the mage. So that can become an issue. Plus, they're just kind of squishing. You don't have DR. And then Warlocks are going to be porting back and forth, using their gate back and forth. And even if you're keeping in mind of where their gate and port is, it's really hard to stay in line of sight of Warlocks. So that can be. But again, that being said, you can make it work. As far as macros, I'm going to be sorry for flashbanging you here, but it'll be much easier to just show this to you guys here rather than find all my macros in here. At cursor macros, I use this for rescue, deep breath, and landslide. This will just make it so that the spell casts at your cursor and you don't have to do the additional click. It makes rescue quicker, deep breath quicker, landslide quicker. If you're new to Preservation Evoker, you may not want to do an at cursor macro at first, just so you can kind of get an idea of the range of these spells. At target macros, I use these so that I don't have to target enemies to do damage. It makes these abilities cast on my target's target. And this is the best way to get out like Living Flames, Disintegrates easily. Obviously, things can go a little wrong if your target is targeting an enemy for CC and then you break the CC. But in my experience, that hasn't really been too much of an issue. Especially if you pay attention to who your target is targeting. I have one for Living Flame and Disintegrate. Here's the Stasis release macro. This will allow you to release your Stasis at any time, even if you're in CCs, you know, even like Cyclone. Arena 1, 2, 3 macros. I think this is the best way these are the best macros to use for like Sleepwalk. So I have a Arena 1, 2, 3 Sleepwalk. This will just allow me to easily Sleepwalk the enemies without having to specifically target them. You can also use Arena 1, 2, 3 for your Quell. I like to use a focus macro for Quell for like when I'm like, I want to be interrupting the Druid Cyclones. I'll put the Druid on focus and I'll use my focus macro to try to get the Cyclone. But it can be good to have these Arena 1, 2, 3 Quells set up as well if there are other casters on the team, just in case you might want to interrupt one of the other spells instead. This Obsidian Scales macro is to avoid casting 2 charges of Obsidian Scales. Basically, this will just make it so that you can't cast Obsidian Scales if you hit it 2 or 3 times in a row. It'll reset after 5 seconds, I believe, or if you cast 2 other abilities. I'm not personally going to use this, but I've talked with other Preservation Evokers who want to be able to just cast Verdant Embrace on themselves to avoid CC. This macro will allow you to do that. So even if you're targeting a teammate, but maybe you're out of line of sight of them, and you know a mage has blinked around to try to CC you, and you just are trying to get a quick Verdant Embrace off for the Nullifying Shroud. This will cast Verdant Embrace on yourself to kind of give you the same effect as a Fade. We talked about the Quell focus macro, and then this is the Time Stop for yourself macro. When I'm playing Time Stop, I basically just use this and I don't have a separate macro. I would think realistically you'd want to have two separate macros, one for yourself and then one for, you know, whatever you're targeting. But this one just uses it on yourself, which is really good for avoiding CC. I want to go over some resources you can use to kind of increase your game a little bit. The first one is going to be other people who stream Preservation Evoker. Obviously, you can come follow me over on Twitch, but these are a lot of rank 1 healers that play a decent amount of Preservation Evoker. You got Feed Gods, Sleepyhead, Lontar, I think plays basically every healer. I think Mad does too. Kankito is like widely regarded as one of the best Preservation Evokers. He's the one that plays in AWC. Obviously, you can do me. And then Sabled is kind of how I got into Preservation Evoker, so I would highly suggest him as well. For websites, there's 2 PvP websites I would suggest. Murloc.io will give you a good idea of what the top evokers are running, and then Check PvP is just a good place to go look at the ladders and find, you know, maybe a top player that you want to look at their gear, look at their talents, look at their stats, that kind of thing. Recording your gameplay, watching it back and trying to pick apart what you did wrong or what you could have done better is one of the most important things for getting better at World of Warcraft, regardless of whether you're playing Preservation Evoker or any other class. I would suggest getting an app like Warcraft Recorder, because it will automatically record your games without you having to think about, and it's got a really nice UI for easily watching it back. And so you can quickly, you know, if you have this up in the background in between queues, you can go back and watch your last game and maybe see what you could do better. As far as like Discords, the Preservation Evoker Discord is the best Discord for any class out there, and I don't even think it's close. I've joined several different Discords, especially looking for PvP information, and we just have the best one. We have, like, I would say somewhere between 5 and 10 rank 1 Preservation Evokers in the Discord. And then you've also got just a ton of high level Preservation Evokers in there as well. And you can talk with them. Everybody's super friendly. You can post your VODs in there to get VOD reviewed. 100% join this Discord and make sure you're in the Preservation PvP channel if you want to get better at Preservation Evoker. And then obviously you can join my Discord. And that is really all I have for you today. I appreciate you guys sticking around. If you've stuck around this long, make sure you drop the video a like and sub to the channel. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't like about this guide, and I will see you guys in the arenas.